Okay, so this is Sarah Wolf calling to the November 3rd meeting of the Manchester-Essex Regional Schools Committee. Welcome to everyone who is joining us virtually tonight. Thank you to 1623 Studios for recording the meeting and hosting it for us. And we will begin with public comment. If you would like to make a comment, please put your name and address in the chat. Please remember that we allot 20 minutes total for public comment, and we ask each person to limit their comments to 3 minutes. I will be timing the comments tonight, and I will ring my bell after 2.5 minutes. After public comment is over, the chat function will be turned off to allow us all to devote our full attention to the meeting. So I see that Cheryl Mulvey is in the chat. Cheryl, would you like to go ahead?
Can we just remind everyone to turn on their mute buttons, especially those on cell phones, because it looks like we have quite a lot of open mics, and that can be really difficult.
Yes.
So everyone could just quickly check and mute, please. Thanks.
Unless you're Cheryl.
Hi, this is Cheryl. I just wanted to let everybody know that we had our first meet and greet for the MERSD CPAC, and we had a wonderful turnout and a great session, and we are planning our first meeting for 2 weeks from now. Our focus is really going to be about just connecting parents right now with each other and kids, but we are excited. It's a great group. There's great energy, and that's about it. But I just wanted to let you all know, and that you can reach us at cpac@mersd.org for any questions or refer anybody to us. It is myself, Sophia Johansson, and Christine Rice-Felder are the facilitators for the time being. We have decided to go with a non-hierarchical group formation. We are also forgoing for now elections because we want maximum inclusivity, and that's about it. Thanks.
That sounds like a good plan, Cheryl. And maybe we can start to get regular updates from CPAC on the agenda.
We would love to do that. I was waiting till after our first meeting, our first official meeting, but we would love to do that. And okay, thanks.
Thank you, Cheryl. Okay, and then Shauna Levasseur is in the chat. And school committee members, stop putting comments in the chat. It makes it hard for me to see who's waiting to talk.
Hi, I'm sure
if I was with you. Okay, Shauna, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I have a daughter who is a sophomore, and I had my older daughter was a senior this past year, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I just want to speak of my frustration with Manchester-Essex being continued remote status for the middle school and high school. And it's coming from my perspective of working in a neighboring district that's making hybrid work. We've been back for 8 weeks with kids, not just elementary, but the whole district. Is it easier? Absolutely not. But we all know in our hearts that it's what is best for kids. We're following CDC safety guidelines, making it work by limiting the number of the classrooms, spacing out, staggering the start and dismissal, and utilizing all of our spaces in the schools. And that brings me to my next point that I am hoping, that you can shed light on if this is in fact true, but I had some concerns about Manchester-Essex schools leasing the cafeteria and gym spaces to the Y, which sends the message that our kids are not going back anytime soon because of the Y using the spaces. And I've also read about some concerns that the high school curriculum would not be as robust versus the remote. And I would argue that it doesn't take into account the whole child and their social emotional well-being, which is sorely lacking in remote learning. With the phased-in approach, which I really appreciate, but once a month for 2 hours isn't enough. And I just wanted to end with the low numbers in both of our towns continue. And if you look at all of the data that the Department of Ed has posted over the past 5 weeks for all of those who've been doing hybrid or any kind of in-person learning. Only 0.1% of students and 0.4% of staff have positive cases, and that's all of Massachusetts. The barriers identified in your study, in my opinion, are not insurmountable, and our district is better than this, and our kids deserve a whole lot better by being in school. So thank you for letting me speak. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Shauna. All right. Is there any other public comment? I think that's it for public comment, unless there's anybody. Do we have anybody on the phone who wanted to make a public comment? If you did, you can unmute yourself and make yourself known. Okay. So thank you, Cheryl and Shauna, for your comments. As everybody knows, I'm not going to directly address questions and concerns, but you are always welcome to reach out to us by email or reach out to anybody on the advisory committee. We're always happy to talk to you or answer your questions one-on-one. We will be having an update tonight on hybrid transition, and the first week in November, we will be having an update, I believe, from middle and high school on plans moving forward. So my report, thank you again for being with us. And tonight, I'm going to keep it short and sweet, but I did just want to say thank you to all the members of our communities who are working so hard to make this 2021 school year a success. Our students and their families, our teachers, our support staff, and our administrators are all putting forth amazing effort. We know that this is a challenging situation for everybody, and we will continue to work together to provide the best possible educational experience while supporting our students' social and emotional needs and keeping them healthy. Thanks again for joining us tonight, and we will move on to the consent agenda. So, would anybody like to
move to approve?
Yes. Any discussion on the consent agenda?
Yeah, Gail, I just have one correction. At one point, I'm called Mr. Erdman. That's it. That's all I have. Thanks.
All right. Anyone else have comments on the consent agenda? So all our votes are in roll call because we're virtual. So Eric?
Yes.
Annie and Shannon were yes. Matt?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
Teresa? And I'm a yes. So consent agenda is approved. And then we have some subcommittee reports. Facilities?
I don't think we had a meeting between our last, did we?
I think we did. I looked back in my notes. I didn't see anything.
Yeah, I mean, we approved the canopy in our last building committee meeting, but I think we told the school committee about that. Is that, am I correct? Great. Yeah, so we're back onto finance committee, and Shannon and I are going to tag team on finance. We had a meeting on Friday, a collaborative meeting with the two towns. There was a discussion at the beginning of the meeting that Shannon and I joined late, where we had talked, and Pam and Avi, you can fill in where I'm missing. There was a conversation about a surveillance testing program, and I think that Pam and Avi and the Board of Health from Manchester looked into that program and felt that it was not appropriate for our district. Is that correct?
I've got that covered in my transition report because we've made a few steps since then.
Okay, great.
Yep. So I'll give it a little bit more detail when we get there.
Okay, and then Shannon's going to talk about some of the budget preview discussion that we had.
Yep. Thanks, Annie. So a couple of things. I think top of the list, we talked about CARES money and whether or not the towns would be able and willing, well, they're willing, but able to take some of the CARES money that they received our way if they don't use it. Essex was pretty clear that they are going to go ahead with I think they're going to call it a do not exceed number. So they think they probably got about $80,000 left. They're not going to give us all of it. I think they're going to kind of wait to see what their needs are. But the fact that they are kind of soft circling a number for us, so at least we have an idea, is tremendous. And we thank them very, very much. Manchester is also willing. They want to go through their budgets and kind of see what their needs are. But I think the bottom line on that is it will help a lot. Because as everybody knows, we're taking money out of reserves, and anything we can do to kind of take the edge off of that would do us very well in the near term and the long term. We also talked about looking at the 22 budget. That's going to start probably in about a week or so. We're going to start putting that together. It's kind of hard to believe. But we talked about possibly creating two budgets. We don't know, Avi, maybe we'll talk about this a little bit later, but maybe a, kind of a normal return type of budget, or maybe one assuming COVID conditions. And I think where we're heading is to create a budget with kind of a COVID rider, kind of COVID circumstances. So we have an idea of what things look like going forward as to the best ability, to the best of our ability. It's who the heck knows what anything is going to happen going forward. We also talked a bit about the Essex playground, and we are looking to order the large construction piece, the large piece of the playground in December, and maybe begin construction March, April. So that's a huge positive. I know a lot of people have been waiting for that. So we said we were going to, and we're doing it. So going ahead with that. And I think that's about it. We talked about a fiber loop that incorporates the Manchester towns. Incorporates the major facilities in Manchester, the town hall, police, fire, and then the schools on that loop. And then talked about adding Essex as well. But that's really kind of like an internal thing that would help us on the back office. And I think that's about it. Did I miss anything? Anyone? Bueller?
The only thing that I thought was significant and worthy of our acknowledgement is that we did ask about where the towns were headed in terms of their budgets. And we know that Manchester last year went for 0%, and I think Essex was in at around 2%. And we said, what are you thinking about for this year? And both towns said they would not exceed the levy limit. And Avi, you can stop me if I'm wrong, but not exceed the levy limit, and that there was no appetite in either town for an override. So that kind of tells us where we're coming in this fall.
Yeah. Thank you, Annie.
Thank you, Annie and Shannon, for your work on the Finance Committee. I think we probably need to think about adding somebody else to the Finance Committee, because I know that Annie and Shannon are both up for re-election in the spring, and I would really think it's important that we have somebody sort of go through this budget season attending some of these meetings. So maybe we can, I don't know if Eric, Ken, or Teresa would like to speak up right now and volunteer that they're really interested in doing it.
I want to clarify, positions are up for re-election. I don't think, I'm not speaking for me, I'm not going to run again. I don't know.
Yes, I believe that Annie and Shannon are both in the position where their terms are running out and they are not planning to run for re-election. And I think it's important that we have a seasoned school committee member go through that budget process in the collaborative meetings.
It might make sense, and we don't have to decide it tonight, but for each town to have someone kind of in a shadow role this year. So there's someone in both Manchester and Essex who've gone through the process, because that's been the team configuration up to this point.
That is a great idea. Okay, so maybe we should just table that thought, and you guys can think about it, and we'll try to make sure that happens, because just the budget planning that we do and the collaborative work that we do with the towns is so important. And I hate to have that, both of you roll off and then nobody who's gone through it before as we approach another exciting budget season.
Yeah, and can we one thing that we did note with the collaborative team was asking them to invite all of their members to our first budget hearing, which I think is the 9th, but I think it's the 9th. I don't know what the schedule is.
believe it's the 15th, but I will
The
pull that
15th.
date. Yep.
But we asked them to invite their respective committees just because there are a lot of people who've been around for a while, but there are a lot of new people, and it's important for everyone to have an awareness of who the folks are on the boards of selectmen and the FinComs in both towns, and to develop relationships with those folks. So they seemed amenable to that, so hopefully we'll see some more people at that meeting.
I think the only other thing, Annie and Shannon, that's probably worth mentioning to the full group is that through our discussion on Friday, we seem to narrow down an approach to the budget this year that's a little bit different in years past, and I think that's what Shannon was alluding to. So where we started and where we ended was looking at maybe multiple budgets or variations on budgets. The ending point was that we would use the December tentative hearing to focus primarily on large-scale financial issues for us. So bring forward a level services budget that works within the average annual growth rate that Annie was referencing for both of the towns, but doesn't necessarily put an entire package of new growth together in terms of new programs and things staffing we're looking to invest in the schools, because we just don't. You're kidding. We're not there. We don't have it, and it would be too quick a turnaround to put something of value together. Instead, we thought we would use the December meeting to focus largely on the 5-year outlook on the budget in terms of annual growth and reserve impact, what the spending will look like, and how we're going to need to utilize reserves, to start talking a little bit about when we'll need a budget correction, and also do a solid overview of what our capital needs are and our schedule for investing in them. So usually when we have the FinCom and the budget and the Board of Selectmen at the meetings, those are the issues that they are most interested in. And I think they're the ones that we have the most detail on at this point. So if there's no objections from this group, the goal was to focus on some of the larger pieces of the budget, assume a level services budget going forward, and then if things get much more positive in the second half of the year, we can always go through our efficiency process and look more deeply at staffing reorganization or growth.
Thank you.
Can you mute call-in user 10? Who's
she already did.
Thank you.
Did. Sorry, I was having trouble finding it.
Okay. Moving on.
Before we move on, so if the next meeting coming up is before our next meeting here, do we need to decide who's stepping in to shadow before that happens? Do we need to decide that in open meeting, or can we handle that offline?
I don't think we need to decide it in open meeting right this minute. However, I think the only choice for Essex is you.
Figure on that.
We'll have a new person, and I will still be chair, most likely.
Well, typically the chair has sat in the role.
That's true. The chair is quite overwhelmed at this moment.
Which is fine. It can be organized anyway. But to answer Teresa's original question, our next meeting will be after the 17th. Meeting on the 17th. So we have a little bit of time.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
So that was a good question. Any other discussion on the budget report? Avi's doing a bigger budget report later, but does anybody else have questions for Annie and Shannon?
Actually, this was the budget report later. We were just going to go over the timeline of what was going to get presented to you when.
Perfect. Okay. So moving on, policy and negotiations do not have a report, so we're ready for you, Pam.
Okay. So a couple of things before we get into, so I guess my report will probably go right into the transition report. So I'll just start by saying we have completed 2 weeks of hybrid on-site, and so far so good. I think we are settling in. The first week was just the younger kids. The second week, 3 to 5 came, and I think we are settling into new routines, and over time, I think it will become the new normal, a phrase we keep using over and over again through the year. So I really just can't say enough positive about the principal's reaction time, getting things up and running in 2 weeks. That was a really high demand. And then the teachers really just answering the call and putting forth their best effort to jump in to the deep end of the pool, not ever having done anything like this before, and really making it work. And when you do some spins through the halls, it's definitely a different look and feel. But, you know, I came out of Essex and my feeling was it's still that warm building that gives you a hug when you're there. So through the masks and the social distancing in both buildings, there's still the energy that makes them the cultures that they are, in the feeling that you are back in school with all of these new rules and regulations. I can't say enough about the kids. They are, whether it's our student athletes or our little ones, they are doing their best to follow all of the new rules and regulations. They're not going to be perfect all the time, but I think the effort's really there. I'm sure the parents are doing their piece to reinforce everything we're asking of them at home. So, you know, so far so good. And I think it's really put a bounce in people's steps to be able to see and connect with the kids on a regular basis. So hopefully we'll be able to keep this up. I know there's a lot going on in the world of COVID right now, but as Shauna had said earlier, the numbers schools seem to be holding their own in the sea of the rising numbers. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed that stays the same. I'll give you a little bit of report on what we've seen internally on COVID and positivity rates in just a second. So the general superintendent's report includes, last week I had said we would have numbers for enrollment for this week. We just finished our annual October 1 report. It's called the October 1 report. It's usually submitted by the end of October, but that's the data that gets submitted to the state that creates our official enrollment total for the year. So we are district-wide right now, inclusive of school choice, at 1273. You can see the breakdown by district-wide grade level up top. The total in-school enrollment for each building is down the bottom. So you see Essex Elementary at 187, Memorial at 276, the middle school at 344, and the high school at 469. Pre-K up here should be updated to read 12. That's the discrepancy between the 1273 and the 1276. We actually have 12 students, an uptick in the pre-K this year. So the numbers that I think are most interesting is we didn't take in new school choice this year, so we're at 39 district-wide. That's an issue we're going to have to tackle through the budget season. Obviously, with our enrollment numbers where they are, we have physical space for students, but we had agreed this summer not to replace the 12 exiting students because we weren't sure what physical space was going to look like with any degree of reliability, and we weren't really certain how we would onboard new students from another district we had never met under these conditions. So I think school choice will be part of our budget discussions going forward in terms of the fact that they have an impact on our revenue. The other number that I'm looking at, and we're going to do some next steps around, is the homeschool number. So we've had families opt out of our in-school programming, whether it be our synchronous remote learning or the hybrid program. You'll see the breakdown is 26, and this is students, not families. So I ask you to keep in mind that we have some families with multiple students who are in homeschool factoring into the total. So we have 26 students at EES who have opted into homeschool, 12 at Memorial, 4 at the middle school, and 1 at the high school. We're going to be putting out a survey either end of this week, beginning of next week, just to do a little bit of a deeper dive to understand why folks may have chose homeschool, not to pry, but if they'd like to share, I think it would be helpful for us to better understand what some of the thinking is there, to see if there's, if it's just conditional on COVID, if it's because they formed a pod before we settle on a plan, or there may be something else at play. Historically, we don't have a large number of homeschool families. Essex tends to have a few every year who opt for that, and that's a personal choice that is there for people to make at any point in time. So we will be digging into that. And I think this might be a good spot. We didn't cover it earlier, Avi. If you want to, we watch enrollment for a couple of things, right? It drives our budget in terms of the number of staff needed to maintain our class size benchmarks. to ensure that we are running classes that are about 20 to 22 students on average, K-12, a little lower at the younger grades. We allow for a little higher at the upper grades. But there's also a big financial component to the enrollment number, and it factors into Chapter 70. And I know there have been some questions from the committee on Chapter 70 because there's a public discussion about something called hold harmless and what the impact of reduced enrollment may do to your budget. So Avi, would you want to share with us what you've been learning about Chapter 70 and the impact of enrollment on it?
To my unmute button. Yeah, so Chapter 70 has been in a state of flux. I think everyone knows that there's been a big push to update the inputs and assumptions for the budget to kind of get with the times, so to speak, of what it really costs to educate children in the state of Massachusetts. There's been some very, I hate to use the word meager, but the increases that have been there in rates have really not kept pace with things that we know are costs, like the cost of health insurance, the cost of special education, and other things. And so that led to the whole Chapter 70 study group, and there was work to be done with the Student Opportunity Act (SOA) to try to update that. And I think Department of Ed has been working very hard to try to do that. So we're pleased about that. But some of those updates may be on hold with the current funding environment. Having said that, the administrative update that came out in July was a commitment, or a preliminary commitment, knowing that the state budget is only for a few months. They still don't have a full year budget, to at least hold Chapter 70 at level funding, which would be great. You may remember that we cut our state aid estimates, so that would be helpful. There are other areas outside of Chapter 70 that we've talked about, like circuit breaker, which we're especially attuned to because it covers costs that are a big part of our budget story, like out-of-district tuitions that are still, I would say, exposed to cuts. But with regard to hold harmless aid, basically the issue there is that the Department of Ed builds its Chapter 70 budget, it's a statute, based on how many students you have of various types and what the cost drivers are for those types of students. And not just grade level, but additional services that they might need, some assumptions that are statewide, not just specific about special ed, English language learners, et cetera, et cetera. And if your enrollment has been going down in recent years, the Hold Harmless Aid program keeps you from having a cut in Chapter 70, so they keep you level. And in recent years, there's actually even been what's called minimum aid, where you get a minimum of a certain amount. It's been typically $30 per student, just so every district can get some level of an increase, knowing that everybody's costs tend to go up. Right now, with the current preliminary Chapter 70 model, there is no minimum aid increase, so it would be a straight level. But implicit in that level is about $500,000. We have a target number of $3 million for Chapter 70 aid. About 500,000 of that is what's known as Hold Harmless Aid, and that's aid that where the state doesn't reduce us for the gradual overtime declines that could be happening related to enrollment decreases that have been happening. Very small numbers, but over time, over the past 4 or 5 years, since our enrollment peak, I think around 2015 or 16. So there is discussion, anytime that there's not enough state aid to go around, and there's questions about maybe some of these SOA changes not happening right away and potentially cut in the state budget, there's a lot of discussion of whether the money should be reallocated differently. And so there are some, I would say, interest groups, for lack of a better term, who are advocating to take Hold Harmless Aid away from districts who haven't had a cut when their enrollment's gone down, like MERSD, and send it instead to maybe districts that have higher needs in areas like, say, urban environments, for example. It does not appear, based on the last comment we heard, that is the 22 budget discussions. So right now, those types of proposals have not been taken up in any type of legislative manner. Having said that, it's something that our district really needs to pay attention to because I think a $500,000 cut in state aid would be significant in a single year. It would carry forward. Even if they phased it in over multiple years, it would be a problem. Excuse me. There's also some other discussions by those same interest groups, which primarily represent, Boston and other urban districts, about whether to eliminate the cap on what local communities need to pay. So that right now, the highest amount in the Chapter 70 that a local community could pay would be 83% of the foundation budget. And they're talking, the same interest group is proposing that maybe that should go away, and communities that could afford it might have to pay even a higher percentage. And so that would impact Manchester and Essex as well. So I think it's just important for the school committee to know what's being talked about, and I do think we have an obligation to let our representatives know what our feeling is. Our communities already pay the overwhelming majority of costs. We get a very small part of our budget in the 10 to 15% level from state aid, and to have that reduced even further, I think would definitely have an impact on the district. Fortunately, because it's not the lion's share of our budget, these are not existential potential cuts for us, but I would say they'd be very damaging. And so I just think you need to be aware of them right now. Like I said, it's not an active proposal at the state legislative level, but it is something that there are groups out there that are advocating for.
Avi, thank you so much for keeping us up to date on that and for understanding it and explaining it so nicely.
So just wondered, any discussions with Brad, Bruce, or Ann Margaret on this? Because, we have been working on at one end of this with trying to modernize the formula, and then it feels like they're just trying to find a different way to take money away. So frustrating.
Now is that it's not that they're necessarily trying to do that at the legislative level, but I think there is a short-term budget crisis, and you certainly would hate to see that be solved in a manner that would impact communities like ours that are already absorbing the lion's share of the cost of educating students. So, but vis-a-vis conversations with them, I haven't had any recently, the little I've heard is that there isn't a lot of pending new news on extending the budget. They're still kind of in a wait-and-see mode of how receipts are coming in for the current year, as well as, it's very uncertain about what's going to happen for next year. So typically the FY22 budget doesn't come out, sorry, Pam, until about January from the governor level. So we're several months out from that, and I would say it's probably likely to hear those two 21 updates and 22 projections are going to come out as late as possible, because I think they really know that there's so much uncertainty in state collections that drive the funding of state aid.
I would say based on past experience, as Avi said, it's more of an interest group pursuing it at this point, feeling that the advances made by SOA aren't actually being realized by communities. So communities that have continue to have, and communities that need continue not to have their needs met. I'd say our legislators are well aware of the impact this would have on communities that rely on property taxes to fund their schools. And I think we are at this compromise because most legislators represent a breadth of socioeconomic circumstances within their constituencies. So usually it's kind of a attempt to get assistance to those who need more without going through a process of redistribution, which leaves other communities without. So I don't know that this will gain a lot of steam at the legislative level, but to Avi's point, it's good to make you aware of it, to let you know that there is a conversation going on, and give you some talking points or some bullet points so you understand kind of where it's come from and what the potential is going forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So under the, if there isn't anything more on enrollment and budget, under the general update, Tricia had asked me to share two pieces of good news that we would typically was sharing a typical year, and that is that Lilia Thanis was chosen as Student Athlete of the Month by Maya for September. And that's based on her academic leadership and her athletic abilities. And they also had a great Tim Averill virtual debate tournament over the weekend. So while some things are, again, different and done differently, we're still enjoying some of our traditional activities that we would in any given year. So she just asked me to share those two positives out. If there's nothing else on the general update, we can kind of get into the COVID piece and the outlook on high school, middle school transition. Is that good? Okay, so this is my cheat sheet on the transition indicators. So what I've done is just created kind of a top level update, green meaning good, yellow meaning we're proceeding with caution, so to speak, and we've got nothing in the red right now, which is a huge positive for us. So the COVID metrics overall, meaning the state reporting, we said we'd be using the state map to evaluate where we are. Manchester and Essex remain unshaded, so we still have very low community transmission. Looking at our Cape Ann League partners, so these are the other communities that we interact most frequently with. Several have been or moved into the red, so you can see the listing here: Georgetown, Gloucester, Linfield, Newburyport, one of the communities of Triton, and I've added Beverly just because they are a close border. Other Cape Ann communities in the yellow, and the list that remains unshaded. The good news is most of our upcoming closeout athletic activities are with other unshaded communities, so they should be able to finish their schedule. We had to forego competition with Georgetown because they are in the red. So overall, overarching picture as of last Thursday's reporting, we remain unshaded. That's not to say we don't have some cases. So to date, including the communication you received from me this afternoon, we've had 2 COVID positives since the start of the school year, 1 adult and 1 child. The impact of that is the close contact quarantines, and this is a school quarantine, not necessarily issued by the Department of Health, has been 8. And we've had to, as a result of the most recent COVID positive, move 1 cohort to remote only for the 14-day quarantine period, due in part to the impact of the close contacts that have to quarantine. So even though we are unshaded, we have had 2 cases to date, and if there's anything else that comes of this, we will continue to report. So just to give you a quick update of how this typically runs out, is there's dual tracks for the identification of COVID positive and contact tracing. So there's the official formal track run by our boards of health and their administrators. And that's the group that issues the formal quarantine order to stay at home. On a parallel track is our DESE guided close contact identification and notification for quarantine from school, right? So when we have kids or adults who we identify as close contacts, and that's within 6 feet for 15 minutes, we are basically telling them to remain home and, for a period of 14 days, regardless of their testing. So they should get tested. They don't have to get tested. And regardless of test outcome, you're on a sit out for 14 days, which is why we have transitioned one of the cohorts to a 2-week remote period. So that would be the equivalent of 4 classes in a typical 2-week span, but because we have the choppy November weeks, it's really only going to be a 1-week impact. So that's the upside of that. So COVID metrics, big picture, good, but it seems to be heating up around us and statewide. I think we're all seeing the same news reports, and right at the school and district level, we are experiencing this. We've only had 2 up to this point. Testing, this was mentioned earlier, it was talked about in collaboration. We have the health team subgroup, so that's the Board of Health reps from each town, our nursing group, and Tanya Colpart, I think I said the last name correctly, who serves on the Board of Health and is also a parent, and our school doctor, Suzanne Graves, working together to investigate different testing opportunities that came up. The group was put together to respond to the Department of Education's solicitation for schools who might be interested in participating in a testing pilot. When the call came out, we responded very quickly, yes, we would be, because it's been sitting as one of our indicators. And as part of our expressed interest, we were invited to participate in a webinar. After reviewing the webinar, come to find out the testing was geared toward people who were symptomatic. So in-school testing of symptomatic students, which I think not even consensus. I said every one of the subgroup members agreed that it was not a fit and did not serve the purpose we were seeking to fulfill, which was to have that proactive surveillance testing, which would alert us to potential flare-ups. So good news, bad news, that system wasn't going to work for us. The good news is this group is going to continue forward to investigate possibilities. Tanya's a great resource. She works for Moderna. She's on the Board of Health. She understands this inside and out. She's been working some of her contacts to learn more, and it's going to work with the group to put together a proposal that can be brought back to both the advisory group and to the school committee to see if we can partner with potentially a company, someone who's looking to provide grant support, or if those two things don't pan out, to come up with a cost proposal that we can then discuss with the towns and at the school committee level to see if it's of value to us to invest in that going forward. So we have a group of people with the expertise necessary and the resources and contacts and network necessary to kind of investigate and construct something that might be able to work for us. So I'm putting testing in the yellow. We're not there, but we're making progress. I feel like we have a better handle on what we want and where to look than we did a month ago. Staffing, another key indicator, is in the green. So it's in good shape at the elementary. I feel like the principals would be angry with me if I didn't say it's in good shape today. I think we feel like this is something that's never going to be where we want it to be, and we're never going to be overstaffed for the need. But right now it's in green, and we have a sufficient number of people to manage the building. We haven't had a large number of people out at any one point. I think that will put things to a test. What we have discussed, and we will be regularly communicating, is that there is a potential that we have an outage to the level that may require us to cancel a class for one particular day if we aren't able to cover it. So we'll be communicating a little bit more along those lines. And that's what we've been talking about since the beginning of the year. We feel like we can handle, perhaps 2, 3, 4 adults out of the building at the time right now. But if everything goes wrong at the same time, there may be a day and time where we're unable to have students who are scheduled to come in be present in the building because we don't have appropriate coverage. In that instance, there would be a very early call to parents about the need to have a targeted no school day. Again, haven't crossed that bridge, haven't come to that juncture yet. And I would say that the cohort situation at Memorial is slightly different at this point in time. This just gives you a glimpse of where we are with the hiring, what we've been able to do. This is hiring beyond our typical hiring, so these are all considered new positions. You'll see that we are starting to bump up against our budget expenditure, but I put the caveat under here that the one number that we need to do a deeper dive on is the long-term sub number. We have long-term subs every year. So what I'd like to do before I lock into a cost due to COVID is compare this outlay to what our annual outlay is. So we can just ensure that this isn't an inflated number. So the 332 could be a little bit lower than it is right now. So I guess the positive in this is we have the bodies, we have the staff we need to run the buildings currently. The cautionary tale is we are already at 332 to do it, and we haven't started with the secondary yet. And if you take into consideration elementary is approximately 400, some odd students. The secondary is twice that size, both staff and kids. So we will run at about this, if not a little higher. We also know going in that our HR needs are 4 times what they are at this point at the elementary school. We have 15 open HR cases that we will have to resolve in order to transition to hybrid. They can be resolved in multiple ways, so it's not necessarily an obstacle preventing us, but it is something we'll have to, that we will be working on over the next month to resolve. So that's where we are with staffing and budget. So I've kind of just said secondary is in the yellow. I think if we use elementary as the blueprint, it's possible to achieve. We just haven't really gone down the hiring timeline yet. We need to establish some HR outcomes first. Program, I think what we've learned from the implementation of hybrid and some of the pre-work that the middle high school is doing in preparation for hybrid is that the model that we chose does allow us to deliver the full program in the high flex. So joining both the remote and the in-school cohorts together through technology allows both the at-home kids and the in-school kids to get their full program or full schedule, depending on your level. Why I think this is important and will become more important over the next few weeks is that the state has notified us that we have to submit a structured learning time report. So they are digging into how many hours, contact hours per day you're providing for, I guess the best phrase, they're calling it synchronous, but in their definition, they're really looking at structured learning time. So how much of a student day is actually guided by a teacher? Not necessarily direct instruction, teacher talking at you, but teacher designed, created, coached, facilitated components of the day. In our model, because we did put emphasis on program, we know we're delivering a full school day. So take out for lunch, take out for recess and breaks, kids are still getting their typical time on learning that they would have in the classroom, albeit it's very different and it's not perfect and it's choppy and there's going to be bumps in the road like the power outage that we weren't expecting last week in Essex. But by design, we're trying to deliver a typical educational day to kids. So program is solidly in the green, and I'm tying budget to staffing right now. I don't know if it's going to go red. We just need to do a little bit more work, and we'll have a clearer picture once we start to deal with the secondary level. So this is the big picture report before we get into timeline for the middle high school. So do you want to do questions on the indicators?
People might have some questions on these, Pam.
Okay.
I saw Shannon raising her hand.
Thanks. So I'm a little confused. When we talk about, can you go back to that staffing matrix?
Yep.
So that is what you have, and that's basically all elementary, and that's not necessarily what you need.
Correct.
Okay. So you said basically where we are here, this is at elementary, it's tight, it's doable. I think you said it's sufficient. It's not what we want, but it's sufficient and it's getting everything done now. If there is somebody who has to be out, you may have the possibility of sending a whole class home for the day or what have you, because we don't have
I think
flexibility.
If we had Jen and John here, they would say it's this line. You can't see me circling it. The subline is the one that probably is the least stable, but it always is. And the greatest unknown is, will we have a week where, like some of our neighbors, you end up with people who need to quarantine for multiple staff members who need to quarantine, or multiple staff members who just become sick and need to be out at a certain time. Everything in school relies on having, particularly with the younger kids, an adult person available to step in and be able to manage the physical space.
Okay.
So,
that kind of leads to my second question. Sorry, go ahead.
I might pre-answer it. So, subs, TAs, and monitors now, we haven't gone into full gear hiring for that at the middle and high school, because until we settle are open HR issues. We don't know whether or not we're going to need 8 monitors just to cover classrooms due to leaves.
Okay. So on the SPED line, looks like 3.5 FTE on that. Does that also cover needs at the high school right now, or is that just covering elementary right now, the 2 buildings?
Elementary, primarily.
Okay. And then my last question. So at this point, we're at 332.5 on costs. You said a moment ago that the needs at the high school will be double that. So that's an additional 600, let's call it 700 grand, right?
Could be.
Okay. Okay.
And what I want to do before anybody, like, this is just early warning system. This number here, 150. Do I have an extra 0? No, I don't. So the 150 for long-term subs, this could be 150 we spend every single year for long-term subs. So we could maybe back this number out. So we might have this in our operational budget under our general long-term sub line.
So we back it out of the total, or we back it out of each group? Like we back it out of 332, and then we back another 150 out of the 700 for high school?
Yeah, I'm overcomplicating this. Let's say I go through with Avi and we do an audit, and we find in a typical year we hire 3 long-term subs for 75% of the year. So we carry that cost already within our operational budget, just not in an explicit way where I could flip to that page and identify it. We can reduce this by 700, by 75,000 or 100,000, whatever the cost may be, which means the new added money is what may be less than 332.
Okay, got it. All right, thanks. Sorry, I asked a really complicated question. I know.
No, it's not complicated. It's more like this is the worst case scenario. This number may be able to, this is a very conservative number, and it may be brought down.
Okay, good. Thank you.
About 140,000 in our budget for substitutes, which typically includes an assumption that some portion of them will be long-term subs. So there is some money set aside, to Pam's point, for this already, and the long-term sub number tends to move around because it's often very much just person specific. Someone's out unexpectedly, that type of thing. There's a constancy of it that we know it happens every year, but the level can be a little bit bouncy given the small numbers and the different types of circumstances that could lead to that.
Thank you.
I had a couple questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
In terms of the testing, and actually this budget thing too, I'm hopeful that we have a change in leadership in the federal level that we can learn about tonight, and it would be great if some resources came to us to pay for testing and to pay for. So I'm wondering what will come of that if there is a change, and I'm also wondering, given that budget you just showed us, if we'll get some grant money to help take the edge off of that as well. So I know that we'll talk about the potential vote tonight, but I might actually ask if we could wait, but we can fight about that later. That's really, I'm just looking at these expenditures and wondering, we'll know more in the next week about where we're going, and so that's all.
Okay.
Teresa's raising her hand.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that.
Sorry. Thanks. I have a question about the program, because that's always my question. So help me understand so it's in the green right now, but when the principals when we had the initial presentation in August, before we made that vote, and they put side by side, if we start with the high flex model that was decided, if we start remote, this is what it looks like. If we start hybrid, this is what it looks like. And this is what it looks like was not attractive, because it was going to be very detrimental to the program. So what's different now? That's what I'm not understanding.
So
are we still going to be able to have because you're saying the full complement of the program? That's what I'm missing here.
yeah, and I think this is where we got ahead of ourselves this summer, which was the secondary was showing that problem, not the elementary.
Okay. But I'm talking about secondary right now.
Right. So when I get to phase 2 of this and lay out the plan, you're going to see that all of November for Joanne and Tricia is dedicated to figuring out how to maintain the program in the hybrid.
Okay, so the green on here right now is
Elementary.
Okay.
And we're still offering the full program as we speak at the secondary.
So this is just where things stand right now, not
right now.
the decision on. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That makes sense then.
Yep. Glad to clear that up.
The texts that I'm getting tell me I'm not the only one who's confused.
Okay. So right now, 11-3, this is where we stand. And
Thank
primarily
you.
we're getting there because we haven't designated any part of any day as asynchronous learning or independent learning. Every part of every day in both the hybrid high flex and the full remote is a teacher directed day unless it's a technical half day. You want to continue on with the game plan for transitioning the middle high school?
Yeah.
And a vote on this tonight is helpful, but it's not necessary. What I'd like is us to jointly commit to January 18th as the transition date in anticipation that the COVID metrics allow. So I feel like it's important for us to put a date on the calendar, both for our internal planning purposes, creating a timeline and a set of deadlines by which critical work needs to be done. And also, so the parent community knows that we are committed to making this transition in a timely manner. I think the running room for transition at the secondary is greater for several of the issues that I brought up under the indicators. We have some significant work to do in resolving a staffing problem. So our common mantra around getting the secondary to hybrid is schedule, staffing, and space. Right, so principals will be working on scheduling and staffing from now through December 1st, and on December 1st, they're going to come and present updated programs to you. If we set a date tonight of January 18th as the date to return students to middle and high school, this is the timeline I see us following. We'll be updating you on November 17th on the status of winter sports. We're starting to see some things trickle out, but there's nothing concrete yet, at least to my knowledge, as of today. Joanne and Tricia are working on developing some on-site activities for both this month and next month. And that announcement should be coming, for the double November, mid-November. And then with the 18th in mind, central office will take on its responsibility of settling out all of our outstanding personnel issues to get a hard count of how many teachers we need leave, how many teachers are going to need accommodation, how many additional support staff we may need to run classrooms. That has been it took about 2.5 weeks for 4 cases at the elementary. Like I said, we have 15 cases that need to be resolved at the secondary. So we're going to dedicate the month of November to getting that done, which will then allow principals to have a clearer picture of what they need for hiring and what adjustments they may need to make to their model to do so. Running in parallel to that will be the development of the third installment of the collective bargaining agreement. So we have a basic blueprint based on implementation of the hybrid and the high flex model at the elementary level. But we do know that secondary has some very different components to it than the elementary school has. So we anticipate there'll be some bargaining that needs to be done around working conditions in order to initiate the transition to hybrid. So ideally, for the public perspective, the revised plan should be available on December 1st. With that in mind, we'd like to schedule a town hall the week of the 8th for Q&A, so that the Q&A is done on the most current version of the plan. And to Teresa's point before, I think this is just a general outline of what the principals will be up to, surveying families so they can get an actual enrollment count and develop cohorts appropriately, really see how many, one of the working models, and they'll have this resolved by December, was in looking at some of our neighbors, they achieved hybrid by going to more than just 2 cohorts. Some went down to 4. So kids were coming in less frequently, but in smaller groups. So they're going to work through where our need to provide the program bumps up to DESE guidelines, see if there's any new news there that's going to allow them to organize things differently, and just come up with a system that's going to work to get the largest number of kids in at a time, but fully accessing their program. They're going to do their hiring. I think in talking with them, the shared spaces are a concern. Not that it's not, there aren't workarounds, and I think they're feeling more optimistic as they go forward, but really settling out how we're going to use these large group spaces. Again, we're dealing with, if we go down to 2 cohorts and work at 50% capacity, we'd have 400 students and 100 staff in at one time. So that's, that's a considerably larger group of people in a facility than we're seeing at either elementary school. Each elementary school is working off about 100 to 130 kids, maybe 150 per day. So it's, it's a total of 400 split between 2 buildings and then in half again versus 800 kids split in half. So I think there's a different set of logistics they have to work out. The one thing we'll be doing,
Can you just, Shauna had that question about the why renting the space, and can you just address that real quick right now?
Yep, it's on my notes in front of me.
Okay.
The why is not leasing the space from us. The why was in at the Essex Elementary School, which has been their home for the past several years. When Essex came in, they needed to utilize that space to run the hybrid, so we temporarily moved them to the middle high school, which was the game plan all along. And since the onset, the plan from there is to move to an alternative location, so off-site as soon as we're ready to go to hybrid. And they've been working on trying to figure out another plan. So this is helpful for them too, to have a date set so they know they can provide a timeline to inform their users and secure another location.
Pam,
So the why is not prohibiting us from going to hybrid in any way.
How many kids are in that Y program?
I want to say 35, but don't quote me on that because it's changed a couple of times. And now they're working at about 50% capacity because at one point they had all the kids every day, and now they have 50% 2 days and then the next 2 days.
I just have a really quick question about that. So for the kids who are in the hybrid class, which now have to quarantine.
Yep.
They're quarantined for 8 days. So some of those kids might have been attending the Y program on their other 2 days, but I'm just assuming that they're also quarantined from the Y program and that there's communication with all those programs?
Yes. Chris is on our listserv. He gets all notifications, and then we do a cross-check to see if the kids are participating.
Okay.
Yep.
Teresa's raising her hand.
Sure.
So in reference to the different models and to bring down the size of the cohorts and that sort of thing, one question or one response that's come out to a couple different questions is in regards to the building already being bursting at the seams with our population. And that was news to me because I'm brand new to secondary. So could you just speak to that just briefly about what are we looking at and why is it already over full?
Sure. Let me go to this. So if our class, I'm trying to do this in a succinct way because I know I can drone on. So if you look at what our recommended class size is, our basic class size is historically benchmarked at around 20 to 22. So if you consider 5 sections at 20 to 22, our school is built for about 100 kids to 110 kids per class. The classrooms are on average 750 square feet. If you look at the class sizes, you see we're a little bit all over the place right now at the secondary. You can't see my pointer. 6th grade, I would say, and 7th grade are somewhat in the typical range, but then you have the 8th grade, the 11th grade, and the 12th grade that are way over average. 9th grade is more in typical, and 10th grade is kind of cuspy. So what happens is a lot of it goes back to, and I don't want to get too much into the facilities, the middle school is basically designed for one team per grade level broken into 5 sections, and there's no additional classroom space beyond that. So when you have 128 kids, the concern was that, can we get a even enough split to have 12 kids in the classroom, because you can only fit 12 at a 6-foot social distancing, and get it into 2 cohorts, or do you have to go to a 3rd cohort because your other option is to use auxiliary space, but all of our spaces are already taken by the subdivision of the students in the building. So in a typical day when you don't have to be super conscious of how you're distanced from people, it's a little bit it's a little bit tight, but it's not, you wouldn't know it. But when now you're talking about needing to have designated spaces, limited numbers of kids in the cafeteria, limited numbers of kids in the gym, Joanne and Trish are going to come and talk to you in detail on this on December 1st. There's only so many places we can put people. And that's what they're talking about in terms of bursting at the seams. We're not on the lighter side, we're on the heavier side. Like if you look at the elementary numbers, they're on the lighter side of where they've been. So when you go to 6-foot distancing, you've still got some elbow room in there because you're splitting a class of 20 in half. You've got 10 kids in the room. Some of our classes are at 18. You've got, 9 kids in a room on one day. So it's playing out a little bit differently at each level. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, thanks. I understand about the social distancing. I think the new information to me was the idea that we're already over capacity for what the building was built for. And so that's a historical thing that I don't really know the trends so well.
So ideally you'd have closer to 300 and closer to 400 in your total population numbers.
Okay.
So you're looking at probably an extra 100 students altogether.
Yeah, I see. Okay. Thank you.
And we can spend some more time on that, and I'd love to enlist Joanne and Tricia, but even the way the building's being used versus how it was originally thought through, we've had to grab space for other specialized programs, right? So at the elementary, it's more of an, and I don't mean to oversimplify the elementary because it's not simple, but it's more of an even split in division of kids, one set of kids to a classroom and a teacher. When you get into the leveling of students, it's not an even division. So there are multiple sections at each grade level beyond just the standard split. Plus, we've already reorganized several spaces in the building to accommodate some of our specialized programs. So what was extra space at one point is now consumed. The athletic office changed from being an athletic office several years ago, went to the swing classroom. So there aren't a lot of extra places to create overflow space or an ancillary classroom to try to bring more students in. I think that's what they're up against.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, no problem. I guess the only other thing I'd add there, what we've tried to avoid, and this could just be a flaw in our planning, is what we could have done is just.
Pam, I'm sorry. Can you mute call-in 14? And I think maybe people who are calling in new aren't being muted on entry, so they don't know that they're not muted.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've got them right here. So the approach we did take was to try to build a model that allowed for a robust program, because we felt that was the strongest strand of input we received at the end of last year, that people wanted the curriculum to keep moving. They wanted kids to experience new and challenging learning, despite the format it is being delivered in. So we built that as the first component. What we could have done, and this is just kind of a little addition to my answer to Teresa's question, is we could have just simply subdivided the entire middle high school into advisory groups and brought them in. We didn't go that route. That would have helped address the space issue, but it wouldn't have done anything in order to help deliver the program, right? Because we would have been having them in artificial groups of 12 students who could come and access being with a teacher in the building, but we couldn't solve for the problem of, if we're using our staff to manage an advisory, how do we then ask that staff to deliver the full program? So we went with the step of the HighFlix, which was, you're going to be working toward delivering your program both remotely and in person, and we're going to try to work out some of the spacing needs that we have and some of the restrictions to figure out some workarounds. And I have every confidence that Joanne and Tricia will come up with something creative to address the problems. You're welcome. Other thoughts or questions? I guess if you don't have them, my question to you is, are you comfortable with me setting January 18th as the date? You don't have to officially vote to create the transition at this point. I just really feel I need to mark a date on the calendar so we can meet some of our deadlines.
Pam, I think it's fine to set that as the date, especially because it is what we officially put in our letter to the Commissioner of Education in our response letter. So I feel like we've already said that and we can move forward with that date.
Okay, great. Anyone else have any concerns?
No, I think the setting 18th is an appropriate time. Hopefully, and again, you've got an aggressive schedule, and I know the logistics of scheduling and getting the staffing and all the rest. The work is going to be ongoing, so I think the 18th is a solid date and consistent with what we've been doing.
And I was very encouraged to hear today about some of Tricia and Joanne's ideas for moving forward. So I'm really excited to hear their report on whatever that is, December 1st. My God, I can't believe that's already on my calendar. Yes. We just lost Pam's picture.
Which picture? Me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay. Does anybody have anything else on this?
I just want to point out one thing, because I didn't scroll down at the beginning and Sarah corrected me. There's the December 1st, but also the virtual town hall at the bottom, December 8th. So I think that the virtual town hall for updates, as well as the presentation of the revised hybrid on December 1st, which I think keeps us all in line. Pam, it looks like you've got a good lineup headed toward the January 18th.
Great.
Did you vote on that tonight?
I don't think we need to vote. If you guys aren't ready, you could probably hold that until the December 1st meeting, once you hear the revision of the plan.
Yep.
And that allows kind of another month of metrics. I mean, I do think we have to have the plan ironed out regardless of where the metrics land in January, but I think the metrics will make that determination as to whether we can actually implement. I just would rather be in a position at this point where we've got an operational plan on the shelf and ready to go, because it may not be the 18th that we go, but it may be the 20th, right?
I think we need to be in a position to pull the switch.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I'm glad that Joanne and Tricia have the time to work out the details of the plan so that it can be a super robust plan that allows us to continue to provide our full educational program while getting as many kids in the building as possible. I've had a lot of letters this week from people who are really happy with the way things are going and are nervous about making the switch. So I just want to make sure that we find balance between keeping going as much as we can with all of the programming and also getting the kids back into the building more.
I also, I guess Pam did mention, and we may have covered it before, covered it coming up. Hopefully there's some of the lessons learned from the elementary schools will be factored in, as well as we'll have a better feel for kind of proportion that chooses to remain remote, or, you know, where things are going, or those that if people have elected to start off remote and then shift later. So that experience is going to be pretty valuable.
Yeah, and I know Pam is talking, and the principals are talking to administrators, and Pam's talking to superintendents, and I'm talking to school committee chairs, and we're all going through a lot of the same things, and people are having similar but different issues. Even my brother, who's an English teacher in Nairobi, Kenya, is they're just transitioning to their high flex model, and so we're kind of all in it together.
Pam, can we back up? I wanted to ask you about the November, December on-site activities. Do we have are we thinking like maybe one a month? I mean, November, you know, is kind of typical, the no school November month, even, you know, with Thanksgiving and all. What are we thinking about for those? Are we thinking about a couple of them a month, or one a month, or?
I've just asked Joanne and Tricia to think about what could be done over the next 2 months to continue the continuity of at least having some type of an in-person check-in. So they're going to come up with some ideas. I haven't really personally dug too deep into that. Anything else? All right. We did the budget timeline review. What we wanted to talk about was just what we had upcoming in the next few meetings. So that would be 11/17 and 12/1 would be and 12/1 would be the initial look at what the level services budget would look like, with the following Wednesday being the tentative hearing. So December 1 is coming quickly. And no school November, I don't really love that phrase, but it is a very chopped up month. So when you think about it, we have one full week over the next 2 weeks to kind of get the budget prepped and ready for your viewing. We have a meeting just after Thanksgiving. So a lot will happen and move quickly then. So we just wanted to kind of share with you the overview that we received on Friday of how we're going to approach it in those key dates, mostly because the conversation we had on Friday, we've covered it here, so we don't have to spend a lot of time on it. We do have a lot of new people who are going through the budget process for the first time, so it's really just taking the time to make sure those of us who feel like they know it inside and out and it just all happens, take the time to make sure that folks who are new to the process and want to ask questions feel that there's time and place to do that, so they're coming along with us and not feeling like they're being overlooked. So I guess I throw this to the new committee members. Do you have questions or concerns about what the next few school committee meetings will look like or mean for the budget process?
Well, I'm new. I'm just no one's saying anything. I'm not concerned about what it's going to look like. We're going to sit through it. I do have concerns that I've shared with Sarah about next year, and I really am eager to feel like there is shadowing happening, because come next year we're going to have 3 experienced and 4 considerably less so, and that's a concern to me. So I'm grateful that we're moving forward with an actual shadow experience in some form, however that works.
Is an amazing teacher throughout this process, by the way. So anybody who's thinking about getting on, it's a total pleasure working with us. He knows so much and explains it all so well. So while I might not be able to explain something, I understand it because of the way he explained it. So just a little plug for the Sub-Finance Committee. It's lots of fun, really.
So it might be a good segue to the combined goals discussion that we wanted to have, just to kind of put the final thumbs up on it. Finance Subcommittee met and did a little bit of work on the budget goals. I don't know if anyone wants to give a quick briefing on what we came up with.
Yeah, I'll talk about it really briefly. Annie, you jump in if we need to. I'm going to look at the budget goals first, because what we tried to do was we had a discussion on whether or not we wanted to have specific COVID goals, or whether or not the COVID goals were kind of implicit in our larger goals. We thought it made sense to have COVID goals so that when we do get out of this and get on the other side of this, God willing, it will happen, we could kind of take those goals off because they will have been achieved. So what you see under the budget goals, you'll have two bullet points with a line underneath. Those are basically our COVID goals. And then underneath are the basic budget goals, which tie into the overall school committee goals under the financial component. So I think that is just a quick overview of what we did. We didn't really change, Annie, correct me, we didn't really change the school committee goals. I think we just sort of beefed up some of the budget goals. We did put a mention under COVID because we thought that was under the first bullet of COVID, because we thought that was important to recognize that, yeah, that's our primary goal right now, is to just make sure we get through this safety, financially, and doing the best for students. So if anybody has any questions, again, the school committee goals per se did not change a ton.
The formatting of the one that's on the screen is messy. I think we had some sub-bullets. Didn't I just see it flash across the screen in a different format?
I can bring it up.
Yes. I think it took somebody a little bit of time to get those bullets to work. So we want to honor the sub-bullet. Yeah, we talked a lot about this because we wanted to make sure that our budget work this year recognized the specific circumstances that we were in. So, and we went through every one of these. So if we want to talk about them at any length, we can, but I think that this is what we all kind of agreed to.
See anything on there that's new or surprising or different that we haven't already covered?
So do we want a motion to approve these two? Are the school committee goals any different than I think we
played language on the first bullet, just kind of recognizing the COVID situation. Did I say the first budget or first bullet? I meant the first bullet of school committee goals, if I didn't say that.
Okay. So I move to approve the school committee goals and the budget goals for 2021.
I'll second.
Please.
We need to, is there any more discussion on the goals? All right, so we need to vote to approve those by roll call. Eric? Was that Annie and Shannon first? Okay.
Yep.
So Matt? Ken?
Yes.
Teresa?
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
Right.
Great.
So then I also went back to my goals, and after our discussion about the budget goals and COVID and our discussion last meeting, my realization that for a brief moment I thought COVID was going to fade into the background of what we were doing, and then, came back to reality to realize that just about every day is going to have some component of COVID management in it. So I just put together a goal similar in form to what we used for managing the building project, with just some high-level areas that I would be regularly working on. And I guess I want this on here just more in recognition of the fact that what we said about budget and school committee goals is true about operations, that this is really going to take most people's time and energy throughout the year. The question I just tossed out to the group is what you have embedded in the school committee goals is a reference to the resolution that we passed about anti-racism and diversity work, which I think is critically important and too big for any one person, and also something we want to keep on the radar screen, but I don't want to set too high an expectation. One of my shortcomings is I don't like to over-promise and under-deliver. I'd rather under-promise and over-deliver. So I think Annie sent a suggestion of something we could just kind of keep there as a goal for kind of managing and supporting with the work that's going out without, if you're comfortable with something at that level that doesn't set any concrete deliverables, I could live with that. I don't know if there's more discussion about it. I don't know if everyone saw Annie's recommendation.
I was thinking that you could pop this into the vision of the graduate line.
Yep.
So I don't know if necessarily the way that I posed it would be appropriate in that, or that phrasing may not be appropriate for that.
No, but I like that because it's funny when I was thinking about if I can get one other thing done this year other than dealing with the COVID issues, I think to get to where we want to go with so many other things, we need to reframe the strategic plan, because I feel like we're missing that overarching guidance document that helps us set our annual goals and objectives, right? So our district improvement plans have been run out. They're out of time and they don't align to anything larger any longer. So this is very high on my list in terms of things that have to get accomplished by the end of the year and at least teed up for next year. Because I think it's going to help kind of bring some cohesion. I mean, we're talking about turnover on school committee. It will kind of help provide a framework we're all working under, because it's going to be a collectively arrived at document. And I do think the anti-racism and diversity work fits in here very nicely.
Good.
So I really like that suggestion. Thank you for helping me with that.
It's what I do.
Hang on, I'm going to try to go to it because I can't read it on this screen. I'm going to read it on mine. But there was one phrase that I really liked that you had under district improvement: develop and pass a budget that maintains quality and forward progress, maintaining efficient practices, but shifting to greater advocacy for increased funding to the district. We've been talking about this for a couple of years. I'm happy to see it here. I just wanted to throw in my 2 cents on that.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you. And I kind of feel like that's a collective goal that we've had as well. So
yeah, that's
I think, Annie, go.
I was just saying that's very Weld-esque, right?
Yeah, and I think we started having that conversation last year, that before this thing we're dealing with came about, that we were going to start to make a noticeable shift. And we're always going to want to work with our partners on the town side to live within our means. But at that, we were getting to the point that exercise is starting to put undue pressure on what we could deliver for program and what some of our long-term goals are. So to kind of go back and hit the point home one more time, I think having a clear articulation and a written articulation of our long-term strategic goals will help us to make a better case for the funding that we want and the adjustment that we're going to need. Because if we set COVID aside, I think we were starting to talk about an override some years down the line being more aspirational and aligned to things we wanted to achieve with the program, rather than just a course correction like we did last time to reverse the reserve usage. So I think there's a lot to just think about in terms of, you know, where we want to be big picture 5 and 10 years from now. And now we have this new thing that we have to factor into it, which is how much has the COVID experience accelerated some of our areas for improvement and also shifted our areas of focus and concentration. So you can see what the original dates are because these are the 2-year goals. We obviously have to reboot this for the next semester.
Do we approve your goals?
Usually, yep.
So, motion to approve Pam's goals for the fiscal year 2021, taking into account the 11/3/20 update.
We'll second that.
Yep. Yes.
Agreed.
Teresa? And I'm also a yes.
Pam?
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for your assist on that.
You know, it's really hard to have goals and try to think about reaching them when there's a fire to put out every 5 minutes. But we'll get through it.
You know, it's probably worth a thank you. I mean, it's been such an incredible team effort from, you know, even though there are differing opinions, I think just having a kind of a, last week I grabbed a little extra time while everyone was implementing. I grabbed a little bit of time to kind of think through where we are and be able to put some things down on paper. And I think one of my reflection points is that despite having different points of view, the entire community has really come together around this and had, I think, such great civil discourse on asking questions of why and how we can do things differently, pushing us to think things through, challenging us to explain why we've come up with solutions that we've come up with. And I feel like even though there's been disagreement, there's been a lot of mutual respect, and that it's really been a team effort between the committee, the admin, the teachers, META, the parents, just to kind of keep pushing forward and trying to make gains every month toward doing better by our kids. I know we don't have a perfect system right now, but I do think we are in a pretty decent position of being able to provide consistency and be mindful that transitions bring disruption, and that disruption requires another period of adjustment, and throughout it trying to provide a high quality educational product for kids and families. And I know not perfect, but always striving to get better, and that's, I think, a product of the team effort for sure.
Yes.
I think we have come to the end of our agenda, believe it or not.
That's crazy. There's
We're 40.
Comment?
Of course. I know we talked earlier about the Essex Elementary School playground, and that we were going to be ordering the parts from Compan. I think that's the name of the company. And my question is, I know that we approved the money, but we didn't pull the trigger, right? Or do we need to? Was it just a wait? Do we have to take any action tonight or next meeting? Pardon?
We did pull the trigger in approving it. We just went back and said, let's hold off on actually ordering it.
Okay. So I just want to make sure that if either, should we have something on the agenda for the next meeting?
Sure. That's
what I'm really doing is trying to set up a fight about the agenda items.
You're really trying to filibuster, Andy. That's what you're trying to do here.
That's what I'm trying to do. So just wondered, is there any action that we need to take on that?
I think it would make sense to put it on the 11/17 agenda as a noted item. We can do a brief overview of the timeline, the cost breakdown, show the design, and you can formally vote, and we can put in the order in December, unless there's a change in the opinion of the committee.
And we make that super quick because we've already done it. We already kind of know what's what, and everybody's, I think.
People in the public to think that there's a chance that we're going to vote not to do it. Like, we're definitely moving forward. So,
we've just said, let's wait on the order, and now we're saying go ahead. So I don't think we need to do anything formal. Can we just treat tonight as sort of the green light?
Up is just around use of reserves because it was thought it was a reserve fund that we used to authorize the expansion, but we already went through all that right now, and that was capital reserves.
For November 17th, as vote to confirm timeline for Essex Playground implementation.
Yeah, Ken, I don't remember. Did we actually say that the funds would come from reserves and we voted it? I don't remember what the actual language of the vote was.
You voted a budget when you kicked off the project originally. Then you accepted the design. So the design's been accepted. The money had been allocated. I'd have to go back in, look at the notes, because there was some back and forth about the ask to reduce the budget, but then in the end, I think the original budget ended up being approved.
Great.
Avi probably calls better.
Yep. So we had talked about it. Can you guys hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So we had talked about it being a $300,000 design budget that Compan had come back with. There was a $50,000 reduction in value engineering proposal to remove the structure, that was the parkour structure. That was voted down by the school committee. And so then we were left with a $300,000 design that they had proposed as being accepted. And the talk was of having that come through stabilization. Now that we're in a new fiscal year, I think it would be important. Stabilization is one of our 3 reserve funds, to have the school committee confirm that intention, because I'm sure an auditor will ask at some point whether we had the official vote to release those funds. And I know that we want to get that purchase order out to Compan, believe by early December, to be able to hit our spring timeline that everybody has agreed is what we want. And seeing that's in the school committee goals, I know everyone's on the same page, but it's just a matter of making it official. So, whether we make it official tonight with an agreement to move forward with the Compan design for $300,000 to be funded by stabilization, or whether that needs to go on the next agenda, I'm not really familiar with the rules about those types of motions. But either way,
vote on it if it's not on the agenda tonight. So I think we need to put it on the agenda for next time and vote on it next time.
All right,
yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
I did go to an open meeting law training with the town of Essex last week. Thank you to the town of Essex for hosting that. It was very informative. All right. Anybody want to talk about anything else?
I do.
Okay.
I think there are going to be a couple quick questions, but the first one is kind of the maybe least quick, which is in the news and last week with the weather, what are we doing about snow days? We have the guidance that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I don't know where
snow days.
Yeah.
So think weather day instead of snow day. So we don't technically need any snow days because kids can't travel to school, but we may need a snow day or a weather day because we have a power outage, and we just saw a glimpse of that last week. So the way it stands now is that if we need to cancel in person for any reason but can still deliver our remote program, we should be able to flip to that mode seamlessly, unless there's some type of an extensive power outage or internet outage which doesn't allow us to connect and have contact time. So I will put something together for that, include it in my formal report next time, and get it out to families so that they understand. Great question. Thank you.
Thank you. And then the second one is everything going, I mean, this is kind of off the beaten path, but the flu shot requirement, is everything moving forward smoothly? How is that in terms of response?
Nurses have been communicating with families about the need to have a flu shot by 12:30 to be in school. We haven't received any pushback from it at this point, and nurses have not rolled up any concerns to me. They feel comfortable handling it right now. They feel like they have good support from the school doctor, and that we are usually, I think Massachusetts in general has a high percentage of people who participate. So, so far so good.
I have a PSA for the flu shot. If you take your child to CVS to get the flu shot, they do not necessarily update your pediatrician's office, and you may have to go back to CVS and wait in line and have them give you a sticker that you can then put on your regular immunization form, and then you can scan that and you can send it to the school nurse.
That's great.
So it's important to get your paperwork when you get your flu shot. That's my announcement.
Right.
I went there.
Yeah.
And I'm really done, is school councils. So I know middle school is getting up and running. Are high school and elementaries all moving forward as well?
Yes, the goal was for every school to have their school councils up and running with their first meeting before end of November.
Great. Thank you.
Yep. You're welcome.
Motion to adjourn?
You may.
Good.
All right. Roll call vote to adjourn the meeting. Eric?
Yes.
Matt? Ken? Teresa? And I'm a yes. Good night, everybody.